I had grown to such a dark place that I almost didn't want to go back to be a mom.
Our marriage relationship really began to fade at a very furious pace. Trish and I met in 1993 at Lincoln Christian College.
We were quite the opposites. I grew up in the inner city, south side of Chicago, and Justin grew up in more of a farm community.
So we started dating in January of 1994, and then got engaged in July of 1994.
But then we get married, and 4 months later find out that I don't have the flu, but I am expecting our first son, Micah.
We had our challenges, we had conflict, but we really felt like God had brought us together. Trish and I started in ministry together. Our gifts complement each other so well. I think that we prioritized ministry as much as we did our marriage relationship, as much as we did even our own personal relationship with God. And so when you do that, your motives aren't bad. I think it's just a subtle shift that happens over the course of time. And so that for that first 10 years, we drifted to this place where we were really good ministry partners, but not very good marriage partners.
So in 2002, that's when God led us to plant a church. And that was like the mega dream. So if we got to plant this church and it was successful, we really thought it would heal other parts of our marriage.
So it felt like we finally had a vision, a common vision to kind of rally around together. And we were both on the same page. People started coming and finding Christ, and God was really showing up in a really powerful way.
We're living the dream. But through that, all of those issues that Justin and I had in our marriage and in our ministry prior to that started to creep its way up.
My need for Trish as a part of that vision became less and less.
I convinced myself that I could just be a little bitter towards Justin, not recognizing that, bitterness will always lend itself to resentment. And that next year, I just became a really resentful person.
I could tell that Trish and I just were not on the same page. Ministry and marriage was a real struggle. So in July of 2005, we went on a cruise for our 10-year anniversary.
He just seemed to be closing himself off in general. My response was like, whatever.
A few months after we got back from the cruise, I approached one of our staff members, and I had feelings for her. That conversation opened the door to really what became an inappropriate verbal relationship that then led to a brief physical relationship. I was at the point where I was going to leave my wife and kids for this relationship. That's how fast and furious it had deteriorated. And so I came home from church on a Sunday afternoon in October, and I said, I'm done. She's like, you're done with what? And I just said, I'm done with you. I don't want to be married anymore. I'm having an affair, and I want out. It wasn't a confession of remorse. It wasn't a confession of repentance. It was just simply a confession of resignation.
With those words, I lost everything. I packed up everything Justin owned. I remember folding his clothes and smelling them and putting them in the box. And it was worse than death because he wasn't dead. He was alive and well. He just didn't want to be with me.
A family friend of ours was allowing me to stay at his place, and everything I owned was stacked up against the wall. And I just remember falling to the ground and just with this feeling of, oh my gosh, what have I done? I had a desire at that point to really fight for my marriage and fight for my relationship with God.
After not talking to him for 10 days, I just said, I'm willing to go to counseling, but I wasn't promising anything.
And God really began to kind of reveal some of the hurt and pain and wounds that we had inflicted on each other, but there was still some hiddenness and some truth that I wasn't willing to share at that point.
I just knew there was more. I had given him 2 months of coming to counseling, and that Friday I went home and even told God, I'm just done.
And I just realized I'm not even telling the truth to myself. And so I called a friend of mine, went over to his house, and I just confessed that I'd had a pornography addiction for 10 years and that I had been sexually abused. And I said, I know that healing doesn't come right now in this moment, but I know it starts in this moment. And he just said, I'm gonna pray that God will give you an opportunity to share this with Trish. And I just thought, are you crazy?
I was having multiple moments a day, just crying out, locking myself in the bathroom and just kind of screaming out to God. These words kept on coming to my heart and mind. one more time, one more time. So I just said, okay, God, one more time.
Came to pick up the boys for school on Monday, and Trish invited me into the house, and she just said, if you have any hope at all of restoring our marriage, I want to know everything right now. I started crying, and I just said, as far as that relationship is concerned, I've told you everything, but I have a lot more to tell you. This isn't about me trying to win you back. This is about me having a right relationship with God.
Justin finally allowed me to know all of him, and I loved him, and I wanted healing for him. And I said, now we can begin again. Now we can start over because you're not hiding anymore.
I have experienced grace, and I have experienced forgiveness in a way that I never humanly thought was possible.
People ask me, how did you forgive? And I realized that I had a forgiveness issue long before the affair. I was holding Justin hostage to so many other things. The affair was just like the thing that sent it overboard.
Out of an overflow of grace, you love. God doesn't ask us to love him out of obligation. He asks us to love him out of response to the grace he's given to us. And I think the same thing is true in our marriage relationship. I love her out of an overflow of the grace and the love and the forgiveness that she has extended to me at a time that I didn't deserve it. And that I feel like that's a deeper love than we've ever had before.